We will talk and analyze the characters of the novel. The main characters of the novel are Lily Briscoe, Mrs. Ramsay, Mr. Ramsay, Charles Tansley, James Ramsay. So we will take these characters one by one and we will analyze them. First, we will talk about the character of Mrs. Ramsay. Mrs. Ramsay, she is wife of Mr. Ramsay, a beautiful and loving woman. Mrs. Ramsay is a wonderful hostess who takes pride in making memorable experiences for the guests at the family's summer home on the Isle of Skye. Affirming traditional gender roles wholeheartedly, she lavishes particular attention on her male guests, who she believes have delicate egos and need constant support and sympathy. She is a dutiful and loving wife, but often struggles with her husband's difficult moods and selfishness. Without fail, however, she triumphs though these difficult times and demonstrates an ability to make something significant and lasting from the most ephemeral of circumstances, such as a dinner party. The next character is Mr. Ramsay. Mr. Ramsay is Mrs. Ramsay's husband and a prominent metaphysical philosopher. Mr. Ramsay loves his family but often acts like something of a tyrant. He tends to be selfish and harsh due to his persistent personal and professional anxieties. He fears more than anything that his work is insignificant in the grand scheme of things and that he will not be remembered by future generations. Well aware of how blessed he is to have such a wonderful family, he nevertheless tends to punish his wife, children, and guests by demanding their constant sympathy, affection, and support. The next character is Lily Briscoe, a young single painter who befriends the Ramsay on the Isle of Skye. Like Mr. Ramsay, Lily is plagued by fear and her work lacks worth. She begins a portrait of Mrs. Ramsay at the beginning of the novel but has trouble finishing it. The opinion of men like Charles Tansley, who insists that women cannot paint or write, threaten to undermine her confidence. James Ramsay. The Ramsay's youngest son, James, loves his mother deeply and feels a murderous antipathy towards his father, with whom he must compete for Mrs. Ramsay's love and affection. At the beginning of the novel, Mr. Ramsay refuses the 6-year-old James' request to go to the lighthouse, saying that the weather will be foul and not permitted. 10 years later, James finally makes the journey with his father and his sister Cam. By this time, he has grown into a willful and moody young man who has much in common with his father, whom he detests. The next character is Paul Raleigh, a young friend of the Ramsays who visit them on the Isle of Skye. Paul is a kind, impressionable young man who follows Mrs. Ramsay's wishes in marrying Minta Doyle. Minta Doyle is another character. She is a young woman who visits the Ramsays on the Isle of Skye. Minta marries Paul Raleigh at Mrs. Ramsay's wishes. The next character is Charles Tansley, a young philosopher and pupil of Mr. Ramsay who stays with the Ramsay on the Isle of Skye. Tansley is a prickly and unpleasant man who harbors deep insecurities regarding his humble background. He often insults other people, particularly women such as Lily, whose talent and accomplishments he constantly calls into question. His bad behavior, like Mr. Ramsay's, is motivated by his need for reassurance. Another character is William Banks, a botanist and old friend of the Ramsay who stays on the Isle of Skye. Banks is a kind and mellow man whom Mrs. Ramsay hopes will marry Lily Briscoe, although he never marries her. Banks and Lily remains close friends. Andrew Ramsay, the oldest of Ramsay's sons. Andrew is a competent, independent young man and he looks forward to a career as a mathematician. Jasper Ramsay, one of the Ramsay's sons, Jasper, to his mother's, enjoying shooting birds. So these are the certain characters which are important to analyze. These are the characters that we see which have the important roles to play, which symbolizes Virginia Woolf